Thank you for the opportunity to present House File 2612, which is $10 million one-time appropriation for Urban Homeworks home ownership program. I feel like I have done my due diligence in this committee talking about home ownership, so I won't repeat the numbers or how Minnesota leads the nation as having one of the worst disparities in home ownership in mainstream and BIPOC communities. Instead, I'll highlight why Urban Homeworks is a great entity for home ownership. Urban Homeworks transforms condemned, underutilized, and neglected properties into safe, dignified rental or home ownership opportunities for low or moderate income, primarily BIPOC folks. Urban Homeworks has focused its work primarily in North Minneapolis and the Frogtown neighborhood in St. Paul, because this area has experienced high level of vacancy and foreclosure rates during the Great Recession, and they have only recently started to recover property values. I have borrowed the following quote from their website. Quote, housing has been one of the primary ways that racialized wealth gaps have been maintained in our country's history. Our goal is to transform housing into a redemptive force, not only for the residents or owner, but for the contractors, vendors, and individual and businesses that benefit from the development and management of the housing we work with. With that, Mr. Chair, I have a great testifier who will walk us through why this is important, and we will stand for questions.
Welcome to the committee. We'll switch since we got this little microphone technical difficulty.
Good afternoon, Chair Howard and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us here today. My name is AsaleSol Young, and I'm the Executive Director at Urban Homeworks. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to present House File 2612 to you all today. I'm also grateful for our Chief Author, Representative Hassan, and our co-authors, Rafaq Bajay, Representative Gomez, Hussein, and Representative Noor. Urban Homeworks is a 27-year-old social justice organization that started in 1995. We started off as a volunteer effort to reclaim and create dignified housing, and we have since then grown into a fully staffed organization that owns, develops, manages, and sells affordable housing while maintaining trusted ties to the community through leadership development, volunteer opportunities, and tenant organizing. We own and manage 134 units across the Twin Cities. Most of our purchases are identified by the community and then preserved and rehabbed through volunteer efforts and contracting with small BIPOC and women-owned businesses. We have also acquired, rehabbed, or newly developed over 120 units for affordable sale. Over 50% of those homes have been made permanently affordable through partnership with land trusts. The remaining are restricted to 80% of the area median income. So today, as Representative Hassan has stated, we are seeking a direct appropriation for $10 million to expand initiatives pertaining to deeply affordable home ownership in Minneapolis communities with over 40% of residents identifying as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and nearly half of residents making less than 50% of the area median income. These funds will largely be used for gap funding, which is to cover both affordability and value gaps that are created from financing between the fair market value of a home and the affordability price required for 50 to 60% of the area median income. In recent years, gaps have risen exponentially. Public funding for home ownership has also increased, and we thank this committee very much for that. However, no one funder will currently cover an entire gap, which leaves developers spending 1 to 2 years on average applying for funding before construction can begin, and another 1 to 2 years before that home goes to sale. Because of these long application processes and timelines, a home ownership unit that we applied for gap funding today may not see sale until 2027. And as a result of this, there are very few home ownership developers who are building deeply affordable homes at 60% AMI or less. Majority of our partners in the work, including ourselves, focus on 80 to 115% AMI because there's a greater guarantee that your gap will be fully funded. And so while this allows for a higher volume of construction, as we know, because you've all seen the data on the state of Minnesota, that is not hitting the target demographic or low median income populations. I could go on to talk about the impact of outside investors, but you are the Housing Committee. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, and I know that Representative Akbaje has a bill that is working to fight this, so I'll leave it at that. The average income, so while we are developing homes at 80 to 115% of the area median income, most of our communities are not at that level. For example, in North Minneapolis, the average income across all of North ranges from 40 to 60% of the area median income. And I have data that reflects that this is not just a Twin Cities issue. This is not just a North Minneapolis issue. This is a state of Minnesota issue. We are top 4 for the greatest racial disparities in home ownership. Minneapolis specifically is listed as number 1 for the greatest racial disparities of a metropolitan area in the United States. Homeownership is becoming harder to attain for BIPOC families who continue to receive income significantly lower than white families. On average in the United States, white families make 40% more than the average black family, and largely due to gains made historically from home ownership opportunities, white families hold roughly 90% more wealth than black households. How does that look in actual numbers? According to a 2016 Federal Reserve report, white families posted the highest median income wealth at $171,000. In contrast, black families reported $17,600. $17,600. We know that wealth compounds over time. We know that home ownership is often seen as this country as the greatest path to wealth building. We can infer from that reality that we all share that while that data is taken from 2016, in 2023, we know that the gap is worse. So we are proposing that this committee works to close the gap with the same determination and precision as the historic measures that it took to get us to this point today. Through a $10 million set-aside, Urban Homeworks will be able to increase the number of deeply affordable homes for sale through rehabilitation and new construction. This appropriation will enable us to produce and sell homes at 60% of the area median income, or to families making roughly $60,000 a year. These funds will be leveraged to cover financing gaps and allow us, a nonprofit developer, nearly 30 years old, to increase affordable housing production without financial losses. We've estimated that with $10 million, we'll be able to develop roughly 25 to 30 additional deeply affordable homes in Minneapolis. This allocation is intended to grow the number of homes for sale in communities that have experienced systemic and systematic disinvestment and extraction. Target communities are communities that have been historically marginalized and excluded from historic home ownership opportunities, programs that have been intended to advance multi-generational wealth and have been previously impacted by predatory lending. This program supports Minnesota Housing strategic objectives of creating an equitable and inclusive housing system by strengthening disinvested communities through deeper economic investment that more closely matches the depth of the inequity, creating greater access to homeownership and wealth building in Black and Indigenous communities specifically, and meeting the demands of workforce housing. And again, I'm just restating what you all have already declared are your objectives. Urban Homeworks is a demonstrated history of moving families successfully through the housing pipeline. We start with stabilization, transitioning families from houselessness or high mobility to long-term affordable and dignified rentals. Once we're there, we engage families, partnering with them in community building, organizing, and civic engagement that leads them to greater connection, long-term stability, and community leadership. And finally, homeownership, providing families with homeownership options across the affordability spectrum. You have heard many requests this session, and we support those requests because a lot of them were made by our partners in this work, and we recognize that we are all seeking to eradicate the housing disparities that took hundreds of years to get here. But we are also recognizing that we need to increase housing stock for deeply affordable ownership opportunities because that reflects the data in its truth. We need a comprehensive approach to solve a crisis that has been allowed to flourish and persist. Representative Nash, you spoke to this, the need for greater housing stock. This bill addresses that. Thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you, Chair Howard, and to Co-Chair Agbaje.